Illicit love makes a person more and more not a person, and a man not a man. And married love makes a person more a person and a man. Every single one of the things brought to light every single one of the things brought to light for a reason in the part one about love and the joys of its wisdom illustrates and establishes what love and marriage makes a person, such as someone who is in real married love becomes more and more spiritual. And the more spiritual anyone is, the more human he is. That he becomes more and more wise, and the wiser anyone is, the more he is a person. That the inner reaches of his mind are opened more and more so that he sees or intuitively intuitively accepts the Lord. And the more anyone has that vision or acceptance, the more he is a person, that he becomes more and more moral and more a citizen, because the spiritual soul of morality and citizenship is in him. And the more anyone is morally a citizen, the more he is a person. Also, he becomes an angel of heaven after death, and an angel is a person in essence and figure, and moreover, true humanity shines in his face, from his speech and from his manners. These things establish that love and marriage makes a person more and more a person. From the very opposition of adultery and marriage dealt with and being dealt with in this chapter, it follows as proved that it is the opposite with adulterers, as that they are not spiritual but extremely worldly, and the worldly man, separate from the spiritual, is only human as to his intellect, but not as to his will. He plunges 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 he plunges this into his body and physical lusts, and his intellect also goes with it all those times. If he lifts up the reason of his intellect, he himself can see that he is only half a person. The chapter about adulteries will prove that adulterers are only wise in their speech and also in their actions when in company with high-ranking dignitaries, like high official, senior official, dignitaries, high-ranking dignitaries, with people famous for learning and with well-mannered people, but alone with themselves they are foolish, considering the divine and holy things of the church to be worthless and defiling the moralities of life. With immodesties, what is it?
Immodesties.
Immodesties. Immodesties.
Immodesties.
Shamelessness. Immodesties. And unchastenness. Unchastenness. Unchasteness.
Unchasteness.
Unchasteness. Unchasteness. Who does not see that mimics like that are only people in outer form? Mimics.
Mimics.
Mimics like imitate, simulate. That mimics like that are only people in outer form and not people in inward form. My my own eyes, by seeing them in hell, have given me clear confirmation that adulterers become more and more
Hello.
inhuman. Hello,
Hello.
I'm reading the book, and if you want to read, you can read next section after me.
What's the book called?
What, sorry, what are you saying?
What is the book called?
Do you mean the name, the title of this book?
Yes.
You can see it's Love and Marriage by Emmanuel Swedenborg.
Ah.
This book.
Love and Marriage. Nice.
Yeah, it's. I read from this. My own eyes, by seeing them in hell, have given me clear confirmation that adulterers become more and more inhuman, for they are demons who, when seen in the light of heaven, have faces sort of like pimples. Pimples.
Pimples. Pimples.
Pimples. Sort of hunch-baked bodies. What is hunch-baked?
Hunchbacked.
Hunchbacked. Hunchbacked bodies. Sort of scratchy speech. Scratchy.
Scratchy.
Scratchy. Speech and theatrical gestures.
Theatrical.
Theatrical gestures. But note that confirmed and intentional adulterers, intentional.
Intentional.
Yeah, purposeful. Intentional adulterers are like these, not people who are adulterers from lack of consideration. For there are 4 kinds of adultery discussed in the chapter about adulteries and their degrees. The ones who are adulterers by the desire of their will are adulterers by intention. Those who are adulterers by intellectual persuasion are confirmed adulterers. Those who are adulterers. Persuasion.
Persuasion.
It's like belief, conviction. Persuasion. By sensual enticement. Enticement.
Enticement.
Enticement, like temptation. By sensual enticement are adulterers by plan, and those without the ability or freedom to consult their intellect are adulterers not by plan. The first two kinds of adulterers are the ones who become more and more inhuman. But the second two kinds become human as they move away from those errors and then become wise. Any comments? The things brought out in the preceding part about married love and its joy also illustrate that married love makes a person more a man. They are that the ability and strength called mainly goes together with wisdom insofar.
Insofar. Insofar.
Insofar. Like for us. Inasmuch. Insofar. Insofar as this is inspired by the spiritual things of the church, so it is inherent in married love. Inherent. Maybe inherent.
Inherent.
But inherent.
Inherent.
Like inherent. Like incorporated. Innate. Related. Inherent. In married love. And wisdom opens up this love's course from its fountain of your soul, and in this way it invigorates your intellectual life.
Invigorates.
Invigorates like strengthen, encourage. Invigorates your intellectual life, which is masculine life precisely, and also blesses it with permanence. Blesses.
Какая? Да.
Hello.
Blesses.
Blesses. Life precisely and also blesses it with permanence. Precisely.
Precisely.
Like exactly. That this is why angels of heaven have this eternally as told from their mouth in the story. Have this eternally as told from their mouth in the story. And from their own mouth I heard that the most ancient people in the gold and silver ages also had continuous potency because they prized the loving of their wives and thoroughly dreaded.
Dreaded.
Dreaded, like fear. And thoroughly dreaded.
Thoroughly.
Thoroughly. It's like completely, carefully, fundamentally. Fundamentally. And thoroughly dreaded the loving of harlots. I was told from heaven that even in the natural world, this spiritual adequacy
Adequacy.
adequacy will not be missing today in those who approach the Lord and abhor adulterers, adulteries, as hellish things. But the opposite befalls intentional and confirmed adulterers. Befalls. What is it? Befalls.
befalls,
Befalls. Sorry. Befalls. Befalls like happen. But the opposite befalls intentional and confirmed adulterers mentioned above already at the end. It is known but not publicized. Publicized?
publicized,
Yeah, publicized. Very much that among them the ability and strength called mainly trials of to nothing. And when it does frigidity, 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 how to say, frigidity,
frigidity,
frigidity, like coldness. Frigidity toward the other sex begins, and after that follows a loathing, approaching nausea. Nausea.
nausea,
Nausea. Nausea. Like disgust. I have heard from a distance from female seducers. Seducers.
seducers,
Seducers. It's like tempter. Seducers who are outworn passions for sexual love. Outworn.
outworn,
Like worn. Outworn passions for sexual love and also from brothels in hell. Brothels.
brothels,
Brothels, it's like house. Brothels in hell, that this is what those adulterers are like there. Brothels is like houses of prostitutes. Brothels in hell, that this is what those adulterers are like there. From these things, it is clear that illicit love makes a person more and more not a person and not a man, and that love in marriage makes a person more and more a person and a man. Maybe any comments? There is an aura of illicit love and an aura of married love. It was pointed out what auras means and that there are many of them, and that the ones that are auras of love and wisdom radiate from the Lord and come down into the world through the angelic heavens and penetrate clear lowest parts. Number shows that there is nothing. Number 425 shows that there is nothing in the universe without its opposite. According to this, since there is an aura of married love, there is also an aura of its opposite, which is called an aura of illicit love, for those auras are opposite to one another, just as love of adultery is opposite to love of marriage. This opposition was covered in the earlier parts of this chapter. The aura of illicit love comes up from hell, and the aura of married love comes down from heaven. It has been pointed out in the places cited just above that the aura of married love comes down from heaven, but the aura of illicit love comes from hell because this love is from there. The aura comes up from there out of the filthy things that the pleasures of adultery of people of either sex there are turned into. Concerning them, see above. It's like aura. These two auras meet each other in both worlds, but do not mingle. Mingle like mixed. Mingle. Yeah.
mingle,
Mingle. Both worlds means the spiritual world and the natural world. In the spiritual world, the two auras meet each other in the world of spirits because this is halfway between heaven and hell. But in the natural world, they meet each other on the rational level in people, which is also halfway between heaven and hell. So the marriage of good and truth flows into this level from above, and the marriage of evil and falsity flows into it from below. The the latter flows in through the world, but the former from heaven. Latter,
latter,
latter, but the former from heaven. Mhm. Former
former,
like latter, but the former from heaven. How to translate it? Mhm. Yeah, former is like first here. Latter is like last. First and last. It's like second. It's like after, yeah. I think it's like last in this sense, you can say. The former from heaven. On account of this, the human rational faculty can turn to either side and receive the influence. If it turns to good, it receives the one from above, and then the person's rational faculty is formed more and more to receive heaven. But if it turns to evil, it receives the influence from below, and then the person's rational faculty is formed more and more to receive hell. The two auras do not join together because they are opposite, and toward opposites only acts as enemies. The one attacks the other out of rage, burning with murderous, murderous hatred, murderous,
murderous,
murderous hatred. Although the other has no hatred, but only a zeal to protect itself. It is clear from these observations that the two auras just meet each other but do not join together. The middle ground that they find is on the one part evil, not from falsity, and falsity not from evil, and on the other part good, not from truth, and truth not from good. These two can touch, to be sure, but not join together. There is a balance between these auras, and people are in this balance. The balance between them is a spiritual balance because it is between good and bad. A person has freedom of choice on account of this balance. In it and through it, a person thinks and wills and consequently speaks and acts as if by himself. His rational mind has the opinion and choice whether he wants to accept the good of or wants to accept the bad accordingly, whether he wants to incline,
incline,
incline. Inclination and incline. Incline himself toward love and marriage rationally and in freedom, or wants to incline himself toward illicit love rationally and in freedom. If he inclines toward the latter, he turns the back of his head and body to the Lord. If toward the former, he turns his forehead and breast to the Lord. If he turns to the Lord leads his rationality and freedom. But if he turns away from the Lord, hell leads his rationality and freedom. A person can turn to whichever or he likes, but insofar as he turns to one, he turns away from the other. A person is created to do what he does in freedom according to reason and totally as if by himself. Without these two things, he would not be a person but an animal, or he would not accept anything flowing into him from heaven and take it to himself as his own. So nothing to eternal life could be etched on him. For it has to be etched on him as his own in order to be his own. And there is no freedom in one direction unless there is the same freedom in the other as well, the same as there is no weighing, weighing.
Weighing.
Mhm. No weighing unless the scales can tilt both ways. Tilt,
Tilt.
tilt. Mhm. It's like inclined position.
Inclined position.
Mhm. Tilt both ways, so it is the same unless a person has freedom rationally to accept evil too, to turn from right to left and from left to right. Similarly, he must have freedom to turn to the aura of hell, which is the aura of adultery, the same as to the aura of heaven, which is the aura of marriage. Maybe any comments, or maybe someone wants to read next section, 439. Either aura brings delights with it, that is, the aura of illicit love that rises from hell, furnishes pleasures for the person receiving it as receiving it as much as the aura of married love does that comes down from heaven. Once again, that is, the aura of illicit love that rises from hell furnishes pleasures for the person receiving it as much as the aura of married love does that comes down from heaven. The reason is that the lowest plane where the pleasures of either love rest and where they fulfill and complete themselves, the plane that makes them appear in its feelings is the same. This is why illicit love making and the love making in marriage seem alike superficially.
Superficially.
Superficially. It's like outwardly. Superficially, although they are totally unlike inwardly. You cannot tell from any sensation of the differences that therefore they are unlike on the surface as well. For only those who are in real married love feel the unlikeness from the differences. Indeed, you can tell bad things by what is good, but not good things by what is bad. As the nose cannot tell a sweet. As the nose cannot tell a sweet smell when a foul smell besets it.
Besets.
Besets. It's like surround. Besets. Besiege. Foul smell besets it. I have heard from angels that they can tell what is lascivious from what is not lascivious in their extreme extremities, just as one can tell a fire of dung or burning horn. Extremities.
Extremities.
Extremities. Extremities. It's like end, limb, extremities. Extremities. Lascivious in their extremities, just as one can tell a fire of dung or burning horn by its bad smell from a fire of spice, of burning cinnamon wood by its sweet smell, and this is due to the difference in the inner joys that invade the superficial ones and kindle them. Maybe any comments, or maybe someone wants to read next section, 440. The delight of illicit love begin in the body, and they are physical even in the spirit, but the delights of married love begin in the spirit, and they are spiritual even in the body. The delights of illicit love begin in the body because the sexual heat of the body is their start. They tinge. What is tinge? Tinge. It's like coloring.
Coloring.
They tinge the spirit, or a physical even in spirit, because the spirit, not the body, senses the things that take place in the body. It is the same with this sense as with the others. For example, it is not the eye that sees and tells the differences in objects, but the spirit. And it is not the ear that hears and notices the harmonies, notices,
Notices.
notices the harmonies,
Harmonies.
harmonies, notices the harmonies in the measures of a song and how the sounds of a speech fit together, but the spirit. And spirit senses everything according to the level of its wisdom. A spirit that is not raised above the body's sensory matters and clings to them notices only the pleasures that flow into it from the body and from the world through the body's senses. It seizes on these. Seizes like grasp. Capture. It seizes on this is charmed by them and makes them its own. Charmed. Mhm. It makes them its own. Now, because illicit love's beginnings are only the sexual heat and itches of flesh, itches. It's like thirst. Itchy. And itches of flesh. In spirit, they are obviously smarty. Smarty. It's like dirty. Smarty. Grimy.
grimy,
grimy. Smarty, dirty, grimy. Obviously, smutty attractions.
smutty,
Smutty attractions that arouse and kindle according to how they rise and fall and come and go. By class, the physical passions per se. Per se?
per se,
Per se. Passions per se are nothing other than globes of desires for evil and falsity. This is where the truth in the church comes from, that the flesh lusts against the spirit, that is, against the spiritual person. So accordingly, the pleasures of the body, as far as illicit love's pleasures go, are nothing but the boiling over of sensuality. They become gushes of immodesty in spirit. Gushes. Gushes.
gushes,
Gushes. It's like flood stream, gushes of immodesty. Spirit.
immodesty,
Immodesty. Shamelessness. Immodesty. Immodesty. Shamelessness in spirit. Maybe someone will street next. So section 441. But the pleasures of married love have nothing in common with illicit love's foul pleasures. Of course, these pleasures are in the flesh of every person, but they are separated and moved away as the person's spirit is raised above the sensualities of his body and from above sees their appearances and deceits below. Likewise, it then perceives physical pleasures first as seeming pleasures and deceptive pleasures, and then as lustful and lascivious ones to be avoided, and gradually as destructive and harmful to the soul, and is finally perceives them as unpleasant, repulsive, and sickening. Sickening. It's like
sickening,
sickening. Yeah, it's like painful. And in the degree that it sees and feels those pleasures, that way it perceives that pleasures of married love as harmless and chaste, and finally as delightful and blessed. The pleasures of married love also become spiritual in the body because after illicit love's pleasures are removed, as mentioned above already, the spirit enters the body free of them and chaste, and it fills your breast with its blessed delights, and from your breast feels that love's physical parts. So then the spirit acts in complete unity with these, and they with the spirit. Illicit love's delights are foolish pleasures, and married love's delights are sensible joys. Illicit love's delights are foolish pleasures because only worldly people have that love, and worldly worldly person is foolish in spiritual matters. For he is against them, so he embraces only worldly, sensory, and bodily pleasures. We say worldly, sensory, and bodily pleasures because worldly people fall into three separate levels. People who are worldly in the highest level are those who have a reasonable view of follies. Follies.
Follies.
Follies, like stupidity. Follies. Follies, and still are carried away by their pleasure like skiffs by the current of skiffs. It's like boat. Skiffs by the current of a river. Those who see and judge only from bodily senses and disdain. What is it? Disdain?
Disdain.
Disdain, like disrespect.
Disrespect.
Disdain. The rational arguments against appearances and deceits and reject them as worthless are worldly on a lower level. People who are worldly on the lowest level are those who are carried away by the enticing tides. Enticing tides.
Enticing.
Enticing, like tempting. Enticing tides.
Tides.
Tides. Tides is like stream, wave, ebb. Tides of their bodies without judgment. These are the ones called the bodily worldly. The ones mentioned before them are called essentially worldly, but the first are called worldly. Illicit love, its insanities, and its pleasures have the same levels in them. Any comments? Or maybe someone wants to continue and to read section 444, 43. Married loves and delights are the joys of wisdom because only spiritual people enjoy that love. And a spiritual person is in a state of wisdom, so he embraces only delights that harmonize with spiritual wisdom. A comparison with houses will clarify that illicit love's delights are alike and what married love's delights are like. Illicit love's delights compared to a house with walls that glow red outside. Maybe glue, or glow, glow, glow,
Glow.
glow like shine, illuminate,
Illuminate.
illuminate, glow, red outside like seashells, or glow from the false gold color of reflecting stones called selenite. Selenite.
Selenite.
Selenite. But in the rooms inside the walls there is in fact filth and rubbish of every kind. But the delights of married love can be complete pure gold, and the rooms inside shine as if filled with many kinds of precious treasures. Mhm. Any comments? The following story is added to these remarks. After I finished my thoughts about love and marriage and had laid out my thoughts about illicit love, two angels were suddenly standing by me, and they said, "We noticed and understood what you were thinking about before. What you were thinking about before. But the things you're you are thinking about now go right by us, and we don't grasp them. Drop them because they are nothing. But I answered, this love that I'm thinking about now isn't nothing because there is such a thing. But they said, how can there be such a thing as any love that doesn't come from creation? Love and marriage comes from creation, doesn't it? Isn't this the love between two who can become one? How can there be a love that divides and separates? What young man can love a young woman other than the one who loves him in return? Doesn't one's love recognize and accept the other's love when they meet? And don't they join themselves together spontaneously? Who can love no love? Who can love no love? Only married love is mutual and reciprocal. Reciprocal.
Reciprocal.
Reciprocal, yeah. And reciprocal. Mutual and reciprocal is like mutually two. Mhm. Inverse. Reciprocal. Isn't it? Only married love is mutual and reciprocal, isn't it? If not returned, doesn't it retreat and become nothing? When I heard this, I asked the two angels what community in heaven they were from, and they said, we are from a heaven of innocence. We came into this heavenly world as children and we were brought up under the Lord's guidance. And when I grew up and my wife, who is here with me, was a marriageable girl, we made a commitment and promised, and we are joined in a virgin marriage. And we are joined in a virgin marriage. And the only love we have known is true, wedded, and married love. Wedded. It's like wedding. Yeah,
Wedded.
wedded. It's like married, devoted, married. It's true wedded and married love. So when your meditations about strange love clearly opposite to our love were communicated to us, we didn't understand it at all. So we came down to find out why you are thinking about incomprehensible things. Comprehend and comprehensible.
Incomprehensible.
It's like maybe we can say comprehensible and incomprehensible. It's like unappreciated, obscure,
Inexplicable.
inex, inexplicable. Incomprehensible thing. So tell us how there can be a love that not only doesn't come from creation, but is even opposite to creation. We regard things opposite to creation as objects without reality. When they said that I was glad at heart that I had been allowed to talk with angels, so innocent that they did not know what fornication is at all. So I opened my mouth and taught, saying, don't you know that there is good and bad, and that good is from creation, but not bad? And while bad per se is not nothing, still it has nothing to do with good per se.
Per se.
Per se. And while bad per se is not nothing, still it has nothing to do with good. There is good from creation and also good in the greatest degree and in the last degree, least. Or in the greatest degree and in the least degree. Least. It's like great and least. Greatest degree and in the least degree. It's like small. And at the point where this least degree becomes nothing, bad emerges. Bad emerges.
Emerges.
Emerges. It's like appears. Comes. Bad emerges on the other side. So there is no relation of progression of good to bad, but a relation and progression of good to greater and less good, and of bad to greater and less bad. For they are opposites in all respects. And since good and bad are opposites, there is a midpoint and a balance there where bad acts against good. But it does not prevail, so it continues in the effort. Every person is brought up in this balance. Since it is a balance between good and bad, or between heaven and hell, which is the same thing, it is a spiritual equilibrium that produces freedom for those who are in it. In keeping with this balance, the Lord draws everyone to himself, and the person who follows in freedom, he leads out of bad into good, and thus into heaven. It is the same with love, especially with married love and with illicit love. The one is good, but the other is bad. Every person who hears the Lord's voice and follows in freedom, the Lord leads into married love and into all its delights and blessings. But anyone who does not hear and does not follow leads his own self into illicit love, and at first into its delights, but afterwards into displeasures, and finally into unhappiness. When I had said these things, the two angels asked, how could evil come into existence when nothing but good had existed from creation? To exist, something must have its beginning. Good could not be the source of evil, because evil has nothing to do with good, for it is the negative of good and destructive of it. Yet there is such a thing, and it is detectable. Detectable.
Detectable.
It's like noticeable. Noticeable. Detectable.
Noticeable.
Noticeable. It is detectable, so it is. So it isn't nothing, but is something. So tell what is. So tell what this something comes from after being nothing. To this I answered, this mystery can't be solved except by knowing that no one is good except God alone, and that there is no good that is from God, I think. Solved.
Solved.
Solved, like decided, resolved. And so there is no good that is good in itself, except from God. And there is no good that is good in itself except from God. So someone who looks to God and wants to be led by God participates in good, but someone who turns away from God and wants to be led by himself does not participate in good. Participate or participate?
Participate.
Participate. Does not participate in good, for the good he does is either on account of himself or on account of the world. So it is either for gain or is feigned. What is it? Feigned. Feigned.
Feigned.
It's like simulated.
Simulated.
Feigned or hypocritical. These facts make it clear that man himself is the origin of evil, not that this origin was put into man by creation, but he put it into himself by turning away from God to himself. The source of evil was not in Adam and his wife, but when the serpent said, "On the day you eat from the tree of knowing good and evil, you will be like God." And then, because they turned away from God and turned to themselves as to God, they made the source of evil in themselves. To eat from the tree referred to thinking that you know about good and evil and are wise by yourself and not from God. But then the two angels asked, "How could people turn away from God and turn to themselves when people can, won't think, and therefore do nothing except by God? Why did God permit this?" But answered, "People were created in such a way that everything they want, think, and do seems to them to be in themselves and therefore from themselves. A person without this appearance would not be a person, for he wouldn't be able to take anything of good and truth or love and wisdom to himself, keep it and make it as if his own. Consequently, without this sort of living appearance, a person would not have a way to join with God, and so he wouldn't have eternal life. However, if from this appearance he leads himself to think that he wants things and therefore does good by himself and not due to the Lord, even though it is by himself to all appearances, he turns good into bad in himself, and in this way makes the source of evil in himself. This was Adam's sin. But I place the question in a little clearer light. The Lord looks at every person in the forehead, and the look goes through to the back of his skull. Your cerebrum is in your forehead, and your cerebellum is in the back of your head. Your cerebellum is devoted to love. Cerebellum or cerebellum?
Cerebellum.
Cerebellum is devoted to love and it's good, and your cerebrum is devoted to wisdom and its truth. So someone who turns his face to the Lord receives wisdom from him and through this love. But someone who looks backward, away from the Lord, receives love and not wisdom. And love without wisdom is love from man and not from the Lord. This love joins itself to untruth. This love joins itself to untruth, so it does not accept the Lord, but accepts itself as God and secretly confirms that this with the ability to understand and perceive implanted in it from creation as if from itself. So this love is the source of evil. It can be demonstrated before your eyes that this is so. I'll call some evil spirit here who turns away from God, and I'll speak to him from behind or to the back of his head, and you'll see that the things said will turn into their opposites. I called one like that. He came and I spoke behind him, saying, "Do you know anything about hell, damnation, and the torment there?" And soon when he turned around to me, I asked, "What did you hear?" He answered, I heard these things. Do you know anything about heaven's salvation and the happiness there? And then when these things were said behind his back, he said, he heard what I said before. Then these things were said behind his back. Do you know that those who are in hell are insane because of untruth? And when asked what he heard, he said, I heard. Do you know that those who are in heaven are wise because of truth? Truth. And when these words were said behind his back, he said that he heard. Do you know that those in hell are insane because of untruth? Untruth. And so on. From these things, it was clearly evident that when a mind turns itself away from the Lord, it turns toward itself and then understands things backwards. This is the reason why, as you know, it is not lawful in this spiritual world to stand behind another person and speak to him. For this inspires into him a love that his own intelligence favors and obeys for its own enjoyment. Enjoyment.
Enjoyment.
It's like pleasure, satisfaction, enjoyment. But this is from the person and not from God, so it is a love for evil or falsity. Besides this, I can report something else like it to you. Namely, that at different times I have heard good things and true things sink from heaven into hell. And there they were gradually turned into opposites, good into bad and truth into falsity. The reason for this is the same, without doubt, that everyone in hell turns away from the Lord. After hearing these things, the two angels thanked, thanked, thanked me and said, since you are thinking and writing about a love opposite to our married love, and the opposite of that love saddens our minds, we are living saddens.
Saddens.
It's like, it's about saddens. And as they said, peace to you, I asked them not to tell their brothers and sisters in heaven anything about this love, because it would hurt their innocence. I can affirm for certain that people who die as children grow up in heaven, and when they reach the state,
Stature.
stature, my growth, stature, the stature of 18-year-old youth, 18-year-old
Youths.
youth, the stature of 18-year-old youth, and 15-year-old girls in the world. They stay there, and then the Lord provides them marriages. Also, that before as well as after marriage, they simply do not know what illicit sex is or what there can be such a thing. Any comments? Maybe. Next chapter 19. Maybe someone wants to read this chapter. Mm. It's fornication. Mhm. Okay, I think I will read this chapter later. Goodbye.